Okay, hi everyone and welcome to this week's Monday tutorial. For those of you that are extremely assertive, you will realise that it is in fact Wednesday, and so the Monday tutorial for this week is coming out on Wednesday. So the tutorial that I had planned for Monday was going to be doing a behind the scenes of the visual effects on my new short film. My short film, which was, if I can remember correctly, called Extraterrestrial Christmas. Let's have a look. YouTube, and then it is E.T. Christmas, yeah. So there's a couple of visual effects shots in this. I'm going to go over the most complex one, which was the UFO abduction shot. So if I go to visual effects, and then it's abduction. So there are quite a lot of things going on in this shot, and I'm going to break them down as quickly as I can and show you guys what happened. So if I turn all of this stuff off, you'll be able to see the clean plate, which is simply this shot. And I filmed this and I just took a screenshot of it. This essentially has to be the background, and there can't be anything in front of it that's not going to be there when you use it as a background. First thing you'll notice is that there are two lights here, and that's what I used to get up this light on the front of the house. There's also a street light here, but that's actually further back than it appears in this image. So that wasn't actually throwing any light on the house at all. These are two little LED panels, and I had them on light stands, light stands, as high as I could get them, and just pointed them at the front of the house. And I was really impressed with how much light they chucked out. Actually, they're only about 20 quid each, so for that amount of money, this is quite a lot of light to be chucked out. And it was pitch black when I filmed this as well, so I knew that the first thing I had to do was get rid of the lights. And a couple of people, when I posted an early picture of the effect on Facebook, thought they were just street lights, but if you watch it a couple of times, you can see that there's like no pattern to the like distance between the street lights here, so it's fairly obvious that they're not supposed to be there. So the first thing I did was make a mask to get rid of them. This is simply a piece of frame that I took from like here, duplicated it and moved it over, and then feathered it so that it matches. And as you can see, even if you zoom in, you can't see the difference between that, like the duplicated area. So it's perfectly seamless, and you wouldn't even be looking there anyway because it's pitch black, so I don't know why you'd expect anything to be just like in the right hand corner of the screen. The next layer is the house light, and what this is, if I turn it back on, essentially when the UFO takes off, I'm going to have to turn the UFO back on as well. When the UFO moves away, if I turn the house light off, the idea was that the UFO is the thing that's casting this light. So obviously when the UFO goes away and the light's still there, that's a bit of a problem. So what I did, it's actually quite simple. I duplicated the clean plate, so I had like essentially another version of this background, and I masked out the areas where it's light. So I masked out this bit, and also there's some presents on the floor, so I drew a mask over them, and I essentially added a adjustment like filter to it so that it would make it a lot darker, and I keyframed it to go from light to dark. So essentially as the UFO goes away, it gets darker, and this is all done in the computer. There's actually no darkening. The lights don't change intensity at any point. So as you can see, with it off, nothing changes, and then with it on, it obviously makes a huge difference. So I did it on the car as well. Okay, so the next layer is the presents, and in this shot you don't actually see it, but in a previous shot the UFO drops the presents onto the driveway, and so now they're just kind of there. And I wanted to have them as a layer independent of the UFO, because the UFO moves away, and the presents were originally on the same layer as the UFO. So obviously when the UFO moved, the presents just took off as well, which looked ridiculous. So I cut these out and isolated them, made them into their own layer, and now they just kind of sit on the floor throughout the whole frame, which is exactly what I needed them to do. And then I also added a presence shadow at the end, as you saw there. So when the UFO takes off, the presents actually get darker as well, which is what I was going for. I forgot to turn the house light back on. So as everything gets dark, the presents get darker as well, which is just kind of works to sell the effect a bit better. Oh, okay, so this is the shadow bit that's showing up here of me. So I'm going to move on to the green screen bit next. So essentially, if I go on the source image, you can see this is what it was like originally. If I turn the mask off quickly, I'll just delete it, get rid of these masks. So this is what I had originally. I had my two lights, the fluorescent lights filming the green screen to keep it as even as possible with the lighting. I used the two lights that I used outside here to kind of give me a backlight, so they're not as high as they were originally, but it's not massively important as long as they're kind of lighting up the right side of me. And then what I did was just essentially film myself getting like sucked into the UFO. My hand went off the screen there for a bit, so as you see there, I had to do a little bit of rotoscoping with a mask to make the hand like not just get cut off. And then I just did like a little bit of I like leant backwards, and then the rest of it was just keyframed. So I stopped it about here, I think, once I started to put my foot down, and then the rest of it was just done with animation. So at this point I animated myself to fly off backwards. So I put the masks back in, there we go, then get rid of this bit, and you can see, so I stuck myself in with the green screen, and it kind of looks a bit weird without a shadow. So obviously normally there would be a shadow from this sort of thing. So I duplicated the layer. I did a similar sort of thing that I did with the presents and the light on the house. I basically added something to make it darker and then just put it on the floor. So you can see now I actually have a shadow on the floor. So without it, it kind of looks weird. And I moved it in 3D. So I made the shadow a 3D layer. And as you can see here, it's actually orientated on the 3D plane, so I moved it on the x-axis, I believe. So it starts off like a normal photo, so it would just be like this sort of size. So you can see the perspective has changed, so it kind of goes back into the distance, and it's simulated 3D space, so this is essentially lying across the floor in the same sort of axis that it would have been if it was a real shadow. That was a really hard way of explaining that. And then I also had to kind of stretch it when it gets to this point, so when I get sucked away, I had the shadow just kind of like stretch and then sort of disappear as I kind of disappeared into the UFO. So you can see it kind of follows me and then just ends once I get actually sucked into the UFO and I disappear. But the shadow is essentially just there to sell the effect that I'm still in the scene, because if it's just green screened, then there's obviously not going to be a shadow. Next up, we have the UFO. Again, you guys have already kind of seen this. This wasn't done in After Effects. I actually modeled this from scratch in Blender, added these as lights, and then I did an animation to make the doors open and stuff. I did an animation to make it rotate. It's got a bit of detail on it. It's pretty simple, to be honest. I'm still kind of learning my way with the 3D software. So I added a light inside it, and I added like these triangular doors that open up. So it's a very simple model. I just did all the animation stuff. I textured it to be really reflective, and then I put some lights in Blender to light it as similarly as possible as I could to the street lights. So you've got an orange like reflection here, which is, I would imagine, would be coming off this. I wasn't quite sure where to put the lights. I wanted to keep it as dark as possible so that the UFO didn't look really like it was not supposed to be there. The next thing I did was, when the doors open, I wanted there to be like a kind of beam coming down. I created a blue solid. I cut it out, so if you can see, if I click on this, you can see the mask here. I just made it come out of the hole here originally and then come down over here. Another thing I forgot to mention about the green screen layer and the shadow, I put a mask around this wall so that they didn't overlap. So obviously if the mask wasn't there, the shadow would be going past this wall and it would look ridiculous, obviously. So I had to cut that out, and I also had to do the same for this light trail, because obviously part of it's going behind this wall, and so it would have to disappear in real life. So obviously you have to replicate that with CG. So essentially this light trail just comes in. I forgot to set it to add, actually. I'm not sure that will make a difference. So essentially this light trail comes in and sells, it kind of like artificially sells the fact that light is coming out of the UFO. And if it was a foggy night, you would definitely be able to see light coming out of this if it was a real life situation, even though this is really, really far-fetched. And the final thing that I added was the optical flare. So it's not on at the moment, but if I turn this on, it's just the beam thing that comes out of the UFO. And this sells the effect really well. It looks really cool. It kind of hides the fact that I just kind of shrink and disappear because I make it really bright, and then it just kind of disappears into the UFO. So that kind of masks all the little things that if it wasn't there, you'd probably be able to see. And if I turn the UFO off, you can probably still see it, actually. I just kind of disappear at this point. So the idea was I turn this on and then it gets bigger as it goes on. So once it hits me, it enlarges to the point where it just masks me out, and then I vanish, and then it just kind of sucks back into the UFO. The doors close, the light like retracts, and then it flies off, and then everything gets darker, and then it also faded out in Premiere Pro. So it got to this stage and then got even darker and faded to black. So there's a lot going on there, as you can see. It took quite a long time to actually get this together. Obviously I had to make all the assets from scratch, so I had to film the green screen stuff, I had to make the presents and model it and animate all the rotation and stuff going on with this. For the other shot, I had to do a physics simulation of the presents dropping as well, which took quite a long time. And but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and this is probably the most complex visual effects shot I've ever pulled off so far. I know a couple of people were asking about how I managed to do this, so I hope that answers any questions you had. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. I'm always happy to answer questions. Thank you very much for watching this video. There are tutorials every Monday, despite the fact this is a Wednesday. So if you like this sort of thing, subscribe, and there will be lots more coming in the future. I do them every Monday, as I said. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all soon.